What's up? What's happening on a Vibe Check Tuesday on the Hoffman Show or on the Team 980? We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. And coming up a little bit later in the show, plenty on the NBA playoffs. But we start the show with a question, as we do, as we are wont to do on a Vibe Check Tuesday at 301-230-0980. And that question, Anthony Haney, is can Jayden Daniels win Offensive Rookie of the Year? Perhaps more aptly, because can he? Well, he's a rookie, and he plays offense. So, yes, he can. All the English teachers, which wouldn't include Marvin. He's a math teacher. Wink, wink, nod, nod. If you know, you know. Is like, will he win Rookie of the Year? Now, I think it's fun to point out, although this maybe isn't that fun of a stat considering what happened after these two gentlemen or rookies. The last two number 2 overall picks for the Washington football franchise have indeed won Rookie of the Year on their side of the ball. Chase Young, of course, in 2020. Robert Griffin III in 2012. Griffin, the last commander to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. So, yeah, that's the question at 301-230-0980. And I think this is, I'm going to put a little more context around this while we load up on some calls here. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show with my guy Robert Mays earlier today, and he had a couple of his quarterback breaking down friends on, and they did their annual quarterback draft. And what they do is they take the next 3 years of quarterback play is the criteria. So you do 3 years and you include the contract and you draft. They went, there's 3 of them. They went 5 each. And so there were 15 total picks in the draft, I believe. And who do you take? And like, obviously, guess who went first in a quarterback draft for the next 3 years?
Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, that would be Patty Mahomes.
Yeah.
Josh Allen went second. Who went third?
Burrow?
No, Burrow didn't go to like 8th or 9th.
Wow.
Because
health?
Injuries and the other caveat is it's not like on their teams right now. It's like if you could start a new franchise, who would you pick? And it was interesting because like Dak Prescott went higher than Joe Burrow because the creativity and the aggressiveness that he shows and some of the stuff that Dak does, they feel like translates to a blank slate better than Burrow's, a perfect fit in Cincinnati with the things that he does. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. They were all kind of in the same tier, but I thought that was really interesting. I think it was Lamar. I think Lamar was third. And then C.J. Stroud, because of the contract, leapfrogged a couple of other guys to fourth. A guy like Matthew Stafford goes way later, but they were, they said when they got to Stafford at like 15, they were like, that's only because it's the next 3 years. If they were doing this year, he'd probably be in the top 5. And so it was a really interesting exercise. And, the 3 guys on here, Mays, Derek Klassenberg, and Deontay Johnson, I think was the other guy. And they all are like more Drake May guys than Jayden Daniels guys. And so May winds up going like 15th or whatever in this draft. Or is being considered, and Jayden's name literally never came up. And, of course, this is for a generic football team. And I also think one of the things that I think in general I have come to have clarity on throughout this draft process is teams value character and leadership and things like that more than outside scouts. If you actually have to build a team, who the person that you're building around seems to matter a lot more than scouting types who are just like, here's some numbers, here's a skill set, we can work with that. The schematics, it all works on paper. Where people look at Jaden's work ethic in the league and they're like, that's the dude we want. And I tend to be on that as someone who thinks a lot about the psychology of sports. I tend to be on more of the team side of that. Because your likelihood that you actually get the best out of that player when you understand who they are as a person and their psychology just rises a lot, even if it's allegedly non-quantifiable based off of numbers. Anyway, it's a whole separate discussion, maybe one that we could have with some fun people at some point. But at the end of the day, Jaden's name doesn't come up. And I look at, Caleb gets drafted at like 10, which I get. He's supremely talented. But with Jaden, I think he's got a not even outside shot at Rookie of the Year. I'd put him second, probably behind Caleb Williams in terms of likelihood, which makes sense. He was the second overall pick. So it's not like, whoa, bold take, Hoffman. It's like, yeah, he was the second overall pick. But I think a couple things have to happen. Like, one, obviously, most importantly, you have to produce. You have to be good. And I think they are going to put him in a situation that he's going to be able to hit some big plays, accumulate a little bit of yardage, and he's going to have put up big rushing numbers potentially. And what I'm hoping, the thing that it could be very Robert Griffin-esque about his season, the reason RG3 wins Rookie of the Year in 2012 over Andrew Luck, although I will admit at the time and still in hindsight, I don't know that was the right decision, but Robert certainly was a worthy winner. I just might have voted the other way. But it's because Robert threw for 5 picks the entire year, and Luck had like 23 touchdowns, 18 picks, and I think Robert had like 21 and 5 or something like that. Obviously, Robert also had 7 rushing touchdowns, so you could make a very legitimate argument that RG was deserving. But that low turnover number was cited by a lot of people, even though Luck threw for, I think it was 1,100 more yards. Robert threw for 3,200 on the dot. Luck threw for like 4,300 something. And so I think Jaden, his best bet to win it, where Caleb could have an Andrew Luck type, like, we're going to put a little bit more on you, we're going to let you sling it, like, we're going to let you cook. Jaden's going to be in a much smaller box of, hey, we're going to limit what we ask you to do as a rookie and let you come along, which could be good for his long-term progression for sure. But what he can do immediately for you includes some really big-time stuff that I think will speak well to a lot of voters. And I think defensively, the Commanders are going to be good enough to keep them into games where maybe he has a few big-time fourth-quarter drives and has some signature moments, and all of a sudden Jayden Daniels at the end of the year has, like, good stats, good record, low number of blemishes on the resume, where Caleb's going to be a little bit more wildly up and down and might not have quite the defensive unit, although the way they played at the back end of last year, maybe they will. And that's how he upsets Caleb Williams and becomes Offensive Rookie of the Year.
I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I think when it comes to, I guess, the other candidates, I think Caleb, he's definitely going to have probably the best shot, to be honest, because I feel like he's put in a situation where he has a lot of offensive talent around him to, like, help him look good. Marvin, I think he's going to end up having those breakout years, sort of kind of like a Puka Nacua, sort of like a Justin Jefferson, sort of like a Garrett Wilson. And I think even when you look at, Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua, it was quarterbacks that, beat them out. So I think that's where, Jayden Daniels, Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, I think they had the upper hand and an advantage just because I think this is more of a quarterback award. Just like the regular MVP award, it is a quarterback award. So
you've got to basically have a skill player who's so much better than everyone else and not have a quarterback who's remotely close.
Yeah.
The odds, and I saw you put some in the rundown. I also pulled these up. Are these also BetMGM? Yeah, they are. So Caleb is plus 200. Harrison is plus 600. Jaden's plus 650. Yeah. I understand that. Like, Marvin should be right there. He would be the third guy that I would have said because he has a chance to challenge, like, 1,500 yards, a bunch of touchdowns, because they're gonna feed him. Kyler's gonna be able to get him the football. And I think the Cardinals are going to be a little feisty this year. They're in a tough division, obviously, but we'll see. McCarthy at plus 850. I mean, they could set him up to succeed really well this year, and he's throwing to JJ. So if you're going to get 1,500 yards to one receiver, it seems like you could have a decent year. Xavier Worthy, Malik Neighbors, next to Neighbors plus 1,100, Worthy plus 1,600, Rome Odunze plus 1,800. I would not take Rome Odunze simply because if Rome Odunze wins it. It feels like Caleb Williams would also have to have, like, if Rome Odunze's in the conversation, it would feel like Caleb Williams would have to have had a monster year unless Williams gets hurt and whoever the backup is in Chicago throws to Rome Odunze nonstop, and they wind up being good in spite of that. Drake May plus 2,000. I don't like that at all. Bo Nix plus 2,000. Brian Thomas Jr. plus 2,500. Nix I actually like better than May in terms of chances for Rookie of the Year. And that's not me saying I like Nix better than May as a player. I think the Patriots are going to be abysmal, and he is going to have a rough time in New England because that is a bad football team.
Yeah, I don't necessarily. Yeah, they're years away.
Like Bo Nix has Sean Payton. Drake May's got what?
Nothing.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct. So, how do you like Jayden Daniels' odds to win Rookie of the Year? 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Your call's next on a Vibe Check Tuesday on The Hoffman Show. Uh-oh, Ant. We're going to have to shame the callers on Tuesday?
I hope not.
I hope not. 301-230-0980. How do you feel about Jayden Daniels' odds to win Offensive Rookie of the Year for the Commanders? Ant and I feel pretty solid. Like, here, let's do it this way. And we can do offense and defense here. And using the odds, who would you actually bet on? Plus 200 is Caleb. Plus 600 is Harrison. Plus 650 Jayden. Plus 850 McCarthy. I don't know if there's anybody else down. Neighbors, Worthy, Adunze, May, Nix, Thomas. Anybody that you'd want to bet on?
I would probably bet on Caleb just because he has Keenan, he has DJ Moore.
He just seems like so obviously the correct answer, which is why he's only plus 200. But I'm like, if I'm going to win, I double my money. Sick.
Yeah, I mean,
but like, even if I'm not getting great odds there, like.
But I think Jayden Daniels, I think he gives him a run for his money just because of the element of being able to use his legs that'll create like for more dynamic play for the Commanders. I just think Jayden, I think he would just have more responsibilities and like more, not more expectations, but I think he'd be able to do more in the Commanders' offense than necessarily Caleb Williams. I don't think Caleb's going to be tasked with, having to do too much because they have a run game. They have stellar receivers. I think Jayden, he'll have to play make a little bit more. And that's sort of kind of like what drew Adam Peters and company, taking him just because of he is that playmaker. He is dynamic.
He definitely is. I just wonder, like, Caleb's situation's so good. It would not surprise me if the Bears are a playoff team this year, which is not to say I would pick them. But if you tell me with the way they played defense in the back half of last year, they added some more pieces. They didn't really lose much. They're not changing schemes on that side of the ball. And then offensively, they add Keenan Allen. They add a couple of other pieces, including Romadunze. And Caleb is better probably right now than Justin Fields was. Danny Parkins said this on our show, and I hadn't really thought about it, but I think he's got to be correct. This has got to be the best situation a number one overall pick at quarterback has ever gone into. Because most of the time, you're either terrible, which is why you had the number one pick, or you had to trade up to get the number one pick, and that means you gave up assets and you gave up other stuff. And, typically you weren't that far down the draft board either because, obviously the farther you have to come up, the more it costs. And so it becomes prohibitive at some point. The Bears traded up a year in advance and thus were able to, and by the way, gave up the number one pick a year ago to not knowing what they would get and won that bet. So they're actually a borderline top 10 team, as in they were naturally the 9th selection, versus a team that was so bad that they had the number one pick naturally. And they added all this stuff. And they were ascending at the end of last year. I just think it's really hard to bet against Williams because he's going into such a great spot, and he's probably the best player in the draft, which is why he went number one overall. That said, you tell me I get 3.5 times the odds on Jayden, and I think that's worth a flyer. It's also because the odds are so outrageous on Drake May, and because I think New England's going to be so bad, and there's so many media members that like Drake May, it's like, I don't know, will I throw $10 down on Drake just in case I hit it at plus 2,000? Maybe, even though I think he's going to have a really rough year, but that's just a totally odds thing. Or he's got the name value that some people might vote for him if he's decent, because of how bad New England might be. But I do think that Harrison's got a shot. He's got the best shot of the receivers. I don't like Neighbors' chances. I don't like Adunze's chances. I hate Adunze's chances, in fact, because, again, like if he's got a shot, it's because Caleb is balling.
Yeah.
And of the quarterbacks, I think Jayden's the best value in terms of both. You're not just taking the favorite, and return on your investment might be a little higher, if you will. But also he's in a solid situation.
I think the best value on the board, to be honest, is probably Keon Coleman in Buffalo, just because he's going into a situation where Josh Allen needs a guy, and the Bills, they drafted him first pick of the second round. They believe he can be that guy, and if he's going to be that guy, we already know he's going to be looking at some of the same numbers and targets that Stephon Diggs, got when he first got to Buffalo. Granted, he's going to have to polish some stuff, but for the future, I think if he's going to be Josh Allen's guy, he's going to have a good chance to have some really good explosive numbers.
Yeah, and then kind of the inverse would be the J.J. McCarthy argument, like Justin Jefferson, who's his guy. J.J. is just going to be like, J.J. McCarthy is going to be like, I'm going to throw it to J.J. Justin Jefferson, and I'm going to live with the results. So there's like, I was looking at Sharp Football. That's where I got the odds from. They had pulled BetMGM's odds, and they're like, our bet would be J.J. McCarthy. And I'm like, you know what? It's not silly. But I do feel like because he's going to be throwing to Hawkinson, because he's going to be throwing to Jefferson, that dude's not going to get any credit. People like, this is kind of the Drake May thing where it's like, do I think Drake May is going to have a good season in New England? No. But there's enough people that like him that confirmation bias-wise, they'll vote for him if he's even decent. Versus JJ, people are like, he's not that good. Like, I almost feel like there's no way that we come out of the season and people being like, JJ McCarthy's awesome. They'll just be like, oh, he went into a great situation. It's Kevin O'Connell. It's Justin Jefferson. It's TJ Hawkinson. It's this. It's that.
Addison,
like they don't want to give. It's Addison. They don't want to give him credit if he's good. They're like, oh, he's just like Brock Purdy. And it's like, what if we look up in 3 years and Brock Purdy is like one of the best 10 quarterbacks in the league? Is that possible that we maybe miss on some of the draft evals, or that you go into a perfect situation that allows you to grow into something more than we thought you could be? And that's, I think, the hope for McCarthy. But I still would take, like, even though he's got longer odds, I would still take Daniels over him on the Rookie of the Year bets. Defensive side, by the way, if you want to get in on this, 301-230-0980. Defensive Rookie of the Year, also Minnesota. You got your favorite. You got another one in Minnesota in first rounder, Dallas Turner. He's plus 400. He's the favorite. Leatu Latu plus 600. Verse with the Rams plus 1,100. Kenyon Mitchell plus 1,100. Terrion Arnold with Detroit plus 1,100. Byron Murphy with the Seahawks plus 13. Cooper DeJean plus 1,600. Chop Robinson, Miami plus 2,000. Who do you like here?
This one's a little tough.
I actually don't think it is.
You don't?
No.
Give
me Latu.
I mean, yeah, I was torn between one of the defensive ends, to be honest, either Dallas Turner or Leatu Latu. And I think Leatu, he's in a great situation, being able to play alongside Pro Bowler DeForest Buckner. You also got Grover Stewart.
And he's the better player right now. The only reason it wasn't unanimous that Dallas Turner was behind Leatu Latu is because of the medical. Like, and especially for year one, right? There's a lot of people that might be like, I like Dallas Turner as a higher upside. He's tradesy, whatever. But Leatu Latu, like multiple really smart people, Logan, Mina, like we talked about this throughout the process as we were looking at these edges. We're like, if you want 10 sacks next year, Latu's your guy. And really the thing holding him back is the medical. And turns out he was the first defensive player off the board anyway. Like, you're telling me I got better odds in a better situation with a better player? Yeah, give me Latu, plus 600. I mean, I think, and also it's been an edge for the last 5 years. I think Verse is interesting. He's not like a huge sack guy necessarily, but the Rams, could they be in some shootout type of games where, Verse has some pass rush opportunities? Obviously, your guys with ball skills become interesting if someone can rack up a bunch of picks, but it tends to be an edge guy for the last 5 years. And Leatu Latu is the best, most ready to play right now edge in this draft. And so seeing him land in a situation that's also really good, why wouldn't he be the favorite? I can't believe he's not the betting favorite. I can't believe I get plus 600 compared to Dallas Turner's plus 400. Where can I go bet this right now? I'm going to walk down the street and go do this.
But I think the thing that probably has betting experts, a little cautious, you got to look at what the Colts defensive line did last year. Like, they were already, pretty good. You had Kwity Paye, who's fifth-year option they just picked up. Ebukam, he had, I think, double-digit sacks last year. And then you bring in Latu alongside with Ty Luke, who they re-signed. I understand why there might be, some caution, just because he might be in a situation where they're rotating defensive ends kind of thing. So, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, he's, even if he is in part of a rotation, he's going to be the first guy in the rotation.
Yeah.
He's going to get pass rush opportunities on third downs. Yeah. I think you're looking at a double digit sacks kind of guy.
Yeah.
Go throw $20 on that, get a win $120.
Okay, that's smooth.
Might consider that. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, since no one wants to call, that's fine. I honestly, Ant, I'm pretty pumped for our next segment.
Yes, sir.
Austin Rivers went on Pat McAfee's show today and said something that I'm sure is currently setting the internet on fire about NFL versus NBA players. But I think he's 100% right. Ant and I get into it next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. So today on the Pat McAfee Show, they had Austin Rivers, who's now an ESPN NBA analyst, on. And I don't know how they got on this topic. I think they were just talking hoops, whatever. And it's McAfee Show, so, things can get sideways. And this exchange happened. And I then saw the quote on the internet, and we would like to talk about it.
Hey, listen, NBA is a fantastic. Let's not get crazy, though. About 30 guys could go in there.
I mean,
who's coming up? Anthony Edwards.
We got 5 max.
We got Anthony Edwards coming over.
Jimmy Butler.
Russ.
Oh, you guys are.
It sounds like they started in the middle here. So the statement from Austin Rivers was, there are 30 guys in the NBA that could play in the NFL. There are not 30 guys in the NFL who could play in the NBA. And thus.
Drunk early in the morning.
Russell Westbrook.
Zion at left tackle.
Zion would be fantastic.
Yeah.
But then he would just be he'd just be a football player again,
Yeah.
which he has been maybe this entire time.
Pretty much. True.
I can put Josh Hart.
So,
Draymond at the end, maybe just clubbing
We've seen
people.
Draymond and pass already.
We saw
Well, he's not playing. He's not playing tight end.
think about them running in these. You know what I mean?
Man.
Like it is.
Fish
It's
out
just.
of water.
Nonetheless, you guys are great athletes. Okay.
Global. We're global. We're global, man. Because football somewhere else is a little bit more important. They call it. You know what I mean? When you go overseas, you talk about football. They think you're talking about real football.
What's that?
Saka.
You don't believe that.
Shut up.
Come on.
You don't believe
Come on. There's no way.
That came out of your mouth uncomfortable.
Talk about soft.
Yeah, I don't even want to. You guys flopping with the soccer community enough. I played soccer growing up. Couldn't do it, but Vincenzo last night.
Okay, man.
Middle of the hole.
What an odd place that they cut that clip. Anyway, the DiVincenzo thing we'll talk about an hour from now, by the way. Just the Knicks cannot play a normal basketball game. But to Austin Rivers' point, are there 30 dudes in the NBA who could play in the NBA? Here's really the question, right? Forget the number. And are there more dudes in the NBA that could play in the NFL or more dudes in the NFL that could play in the NBA?
There are more dudes in the NBA that can play in the NFL.
Easily.
It's not even close.
Because here's the thing that people don't understand about, or people fail to forget, or fail to remember. I'll say it right eventually. About NBA athletes. Here's the thing that people fail to remember about NBA athletes. They're enormous. And I'm reminded of this anytime there is a picture of an NBA player next to any other kind of athlete, which actually happened quite a bit this weekend because a lot of pro athletes were in Miami for the Formula One race. Kevin Durant is there, Jimmy Butler is there, and these dudes are all getting together. And, there is a photo of Kevin Durant, who could not play in the NFL. Way too skinny, not strong enough. But it's him standing next to Patrick Mahomes, I think it was, and Mahomes looks so small. Now, obviously, they're wearing, baggier clothes. You can't really understand how thick Mahomes is compared to how rail thin Durant is. So I'm not saying it's not relevant. But the sheer size, speed, physicality of NBA athletes is intense. And I do think, because most of these dudes are playing receiver, the ability to read space, and obviously you have to just be able to run and catch. You don't have to be able to dribble, pass, shoot. The skill level's not nearly as high. Not that route running and stuff isn't a skill, but NBA players have great feet. That's part of being a great mover in the NBA. It's so much easier for an NBA guy to theoretically translate to the NFL than, hey, we got to teach this NFL guy to shoot at an NBA caliber clip. Not close.
Yeah, also, I will say this. I think since basketball is more accessible of a sport, because you can't just go outside and randomly play, NFL caliber football with pads and help. You could. You go to Modell's and get all that equipment, but nobody's doing that.
No.
I think with a basketball, everybody could just pick up a basketball, go hoop. You got the celebrity basketball games where you got football players playing in these games and things of that nature. So I think, in some people's mind, you see, C.J. Stroud hitting threes, you see Micah Parsons, getting dunks and laying things up, and they think it's simple, but basketball just requires so much more skill, so much more, precision, and not to say football doesn't, but I just think it's a different style game. Football is more predicated
the continuous decision making of basketball.
Yeah.
The space for mental errors is just so much smaller.
Yeah.
If you're a receiver and you run a wrong route and you're on the backside of a play, who cares? There's no such thing as not being involved in the play in basketball. You're always affecting your defender and thus the help defense, and everything's in play. And I think the other thing is, to get back to my original point on the size element, think about people that we don't think of as that big in the NBA. Russell Westbrook's a great example. Okay? Think especially if I go prime Russ on you. I got a dude for you. If I tell you this is, let's go back a month. It's NFL draft season. Hey, I just watched tape of this prospect. This dude's 6'3", 200 pounds, maybe 205. He's the twitchiest athlete I've ever seen. He probably runs mid 4.4s, if not low 4.5s. And he's 6'3". And he's got a 44-inch vertical. You interested?
Yes.
You're yeah, sign me up.
No
He's that's a top 10 pick, right? That's Russell Westbrook. Russ ain't even that big by NBA standards, right? Think of a dude like James Harden. How shifty he is at his size, and James has got girth as a big man.
He could play tight end.
Yeah, how shifty he is, how well he understands space,
Mm-hmm.
or Could James Harden play quarterback? Big, 6'7", 235, like great vision.
There's some quarterbacks
might come up a little bit small in big moments, but we can talk about that at a different time.
I think you got Jalen Suggs, though. He's a former quarterback.
Certainly, yeah. Then, Iverson was,
Edwards.
yeah. Like, another guy, Jimmy Butler.
Yep.
Like 6'7". Like,
we don't have to talk about LeBron. We already know what LeBron.
Yeah, we know LeBron could have been.
He would have been nasty.
He was like All-State as a sophomore. Then was like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, he was definitely an NFL caliber player. But like, the other thing is, some of these guys are so big. Like, does it work if you're 6'9"? I mean, LeBron at one point was like 280. So like, yeah, LeBron could have figured it out. Do they play with the physicality? Like, there's definitely questions. But if we're talking about, we need to find 30 dudes who can play, 25 that can play receiver and 5 that can play tight end. Yeah. I like that a lot better than finding 30 dudes in the NBA or in the NFL who are good enough dribblers, passers, and shooters. And by the way, are big enough, because that's the other thing, right? Who are the biggest dudes in the NFL height-wise? It's like offensive linemen are like 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". Yeah. Oh, so they're undersized wings?
Yeah. I mean, then you got some receivers, though. Marvin Harrison, he just came into the league. He's about 6'4". You got T. Higgins, that's 6'5".
Yeah,
very athletic, bounce. Who else?
Right. And that's the thing. It's not that these guys aren't great athletes, and part of it is because, there are certain body types that are better. Like if you're above 6'5", it's really hard to play in the NFL at anything but offensive tackle. Yeah. So unless you're 6'8", 350, you're Jonathan Ogden, you're, those types of guys, it's just hard to play in the NFL at 6'6".
Yeah.
As a receiver. Now, tight ends, there's a couple of guys that are that big.
You got Myles Garrett, athlete.
Yeah. But again, like, just how enormously large NBA players are and how tall they are.
Yeah.
I think it's just a preventative thing.
It ain't fair.
It's not. How you think Zaire would agree with us, or he'd be mad at this conversation?
I think he would agree.
Yeah.
I think he definitely would be trying to defend, the football players, just because, like I said, there's a guy that's in the NFL right now that's playing for the Minnesota Vikings. He was a transfer. He was playing basketball with the Syracuse basketball team, was losing weight, though, so he stopped playing. But I'm like, they have some hoopers over there. Like,
I'm sure there's 10 to 12 guys in the NFL that could probably be NBA players if they dedicated a year to training for basketball.
Yeah, so he will be putting those guys out. But I'm just like, you guys have like 700 people in the NFL. Of course, there's going to be, a couple people.
Right, there's only 450 NBA guys. Exactly. And we're saying like, 8% of the league could probably transfer over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now here's I think this is like, if you were to come up with like an Olympic Games or like some kind of decathlon of like, all right, we're gonna put together a 4x1 team. We're gonna put together, a 5-on-5 basketball game. Like obviously the NBA players are gonna win 5-on-5, but if you were to somehow rig it where it's like, all right, give us your best 5-on-5 game, and every play nothing but 1s and 2s for the NBA guys, and the NFL guys get like 3 for 2 and 5 for 3. Or something. Like you rig the scoring system and try to make it a little more fair. Like how close is that game?
Are these guys playing seriously though? Like, is it a serious basketball game where it's like the Olympics? Oh, okay. Well, they'll probably destroy them.
Yeah, the NBA guys would wreck their lives. But like it would be interesting. I mean, how many dudes would foul out in the NFL? I mean, that is the thing. If you've ever played basketball, football players,
man,
it's the worst.
They guard like this with their hands out. You really can't.
I'm not touching you, bro.
They are very physical. I will say, vertically, though, they have bounce. I say all of those guys can squat something serious.
Yeah, I mean, a weightlifting competition, if that's part of it, football players crush them. Oh, yeah. It's not even saying they're better athletes, right? That is ultimately kind of the fun part of this. Is like, who's the best athletes on the planet? Like, NFL players are really hard to beat. But it also depends on, like, the hand-eye coordination to be able to catch, shoot, dribble, pass the way NBA guys do is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
What's the sporting competition that's the best matchup? You have to take the skill part out of it. I feel like it'd be like a 4 by something.
Kickball.
all those dudes would suck. The soccer players are walking up being like, we have come to play.
I mean, I feel like the football players are going to win.
Okay, we need like 4 sports, and then we need a mock 4x1. Basketball, soccer, football,
and track is in one.
Well, the track guys would win. Like, that's the other thing. Is like when you start doing the crossover stuff, it's like, hey, how what would Usain Bolt run in the 40? Like, could he beat Deshaun Jackson? It's like, do you realize how much faster Usain Bolt was than any football player that's ever played in the NFL?
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about legitimate 4.0, maybe 3.9 speed.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why they had did you watch any of the Pro Bowl games and how they had I think we will have to just steal some of those games. I think those tests, strength, speed, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It'd be fun. The ultimate athlete. Feels like something that would have happened during COVID. Remember when we were watching dudes play horse on their phones?
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was, but also it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Guest update, David Aldridge will join us talking about the NBA playoffs coming up at 5 p.m. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. I guess real quick before we get to David Aldridge coming up at 5 o'clock. But with DA, we'll talk about the NBA playoffs, obviously. I also want to see if he's got any thoughts on where we spent our first hour yesterday, which is thoughts on who the Wizards should be looking at and ultimately hire as their head coach. What kind of coaching profile does he look for? You know, is this the team, or is this a team in the Wizards that needs a veteran coach? Is this a team that needs someone new, like a JJ Redick type? Is this someone who needs an up-and-coming assistant type, including potentially, potentially including Brian Keefe, who was the interim? So we'll talk to David about all of those things coming up at the top of the hour, 5 p.m. So about 10 minutes from right now. But I really do feel like, and the story I mentioned at the end of Trending is genuinely hilarious to me. And it touches on something that we talked about at 6 o'clock yesterday, which if you missed this segment, you can go back and listen to it on the Hoffman Show podcast, where we talked about how the WNBA is just its own worst enemy. Tonight, they will stream on WNBA League Pass, which, by the way, is like $35 for the year. Easy, great investment. Phenomenal. Like, it's stealing. They actually need to up the price. It's, again, their own worst enemy. We don't have the money. Well, quit giving away your product, you clowns. But they're like their own worst enemy, and they're deciding after, 1 million people watched a Twitter stream of Angel Reese's debut that they're going to actually put the Liberty Sky game on television tonight. But I saw a video over the weekend of Caitlin Clark walking through an airport. I guess it was probably DFW in Dallas. Maybe it was Love Field in Dallas. Either way, I'm guessing that's where they were for their first preseason game. But maybe it was when they were getting back to Indianapolis. And, like, she's got her bodyguard with her, but there's people kind of paparazziing it. And, like, the failure to realize that Caitlin Clark is famous enough that she can't really fly public and she can't just be moseying around airports. Like, I'm sorry, but, like, that's where Caitlin Clark is. And they'll never say this. They'll say, oh, we've been working to figure out a way to finance this, whatever, for years. But, like, legit, for years, if you were to go to DCA at the right time or Dulles for the right time, as the Mystics were headed out of town, like, you could have seen Elena Deladon just chilling at the airport. Did it ever happen to you? I never actually crossed paths with them. You cross paths with, like, college teams all the time.
I crossed paths with a couple of WNBA players before. Diamond DeShields, when she was with the Chicago Sky, she was in the airport. She might have been with her team. I knew who she was because she was so good.
It's one thing, like, if she's flying home on her own, like,
I think she was with her team.
But, like, you might just, like, run into the Chicago Sky at the airport.
Yep.
Like, that's crazy. But also, like, now with Clark, especially, but, like, I think Angel and, like, there's plenty of other vets that are pretty famous.
Yep.
Like, it becomes like a safety thing. And, look, an airport's one of the safer places you can be. But it's just like hey, do you want your players to be able to go through the airport without getting harassed? Like, if there's a flight delay, is Caitlin Clark going to be stuck signing autographs for 2 hours at the Indianapolis International Airport? Like, it does really feel like one viral video of Caitlin Clark walking through the airport was enough to get the Kathy Engelbart and the WNBA brass to the table to be like, yeah, I think we should charter flights for everybody.
And people have been calling for this for
forever.
You got an MVP in Aja Wilson, who's been calling for it, like, even before her, Diana Taurasi, the Maya Moores, all these people.
Sue, like, on down the list. I mean, this was an issue on a more serious note with BG last year. After what Brittany Griner went through in Russia, did you want her walking through an airport? So there's that aspect. They're kind of safety, just like these are public figures. Is it good for them to have to deal with the general public unprotected at an airport kind of thing? Because people do go up to public figures and, even if it's nice, it's just like, it's a lot. It's a lot to have to be on all the time when you're recognizable on the level. And look, they're very tall women walking through this. Like, it's not like they can hide. And one thing if it was a soccer team, Like, I love the Spirit and think they should also be flying private whenever possible. But like, it's a lot easier for 5'3" Croy Bethune or even 5 foot. Trinity Rodman's a star and like screams stardom. But Trin can put on a hoodie and get through an airport. You'll be like, she's kind of tall and athletic looking. But like, Asia Wilson can't go anywhere without someone being like, that's Asia Wilson. She's 6'4".
Yep.
It's actually one of the, like, we joke about it with Alicia. AC is only 5'10". And so, like, we can go out with Alicia and people will be like, she's kind of tall and athletic looking. But, like, it's not like if we went out. True story from Vegas when we were there. And we were out with, it was AC and Kia Stokes. And AC's 5'10". Kia Stokes is 6'3". The second Kia got with us. Do you guys play for the Aces? Like we're at a casino going to play bingo.
Hey, you don't see too many 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" women, you know.
Do you guys play for the Aces? What gave it away? Was it the 6'3" setter that's hanging out here with us?
Oh man. So
like, it really did feel like Caitlin Clark went through an airport one time and they were like, nope, can't do that again. And good. If that's what, this is the thing. Like, if it takes Caitlin's fame to get what the league should have been doing forever done, better late than never. But what the hell took so long? Because the other part of this, quickly, before we get to DA, is there's a performance aspect to this, too. You play a game at 7 o'clock at night, and you want to get to the next city because you have another game 2 days later, or you want to be able to kind of control your travel to optimize for performance. Because unlike your average business trip, like, your body's ability to perform is important, which, like, mentally, of course, you want to be up for the big meeting if you're a sales associate or whatever your job is, a consultant, whatever. But your injury risk isn't higher. And there's a performance and a player safety element to private travel that is also like a deeper, longer conversation. But that is why, on top of all this other stuff, is why. And again, if it took Caitlin, better late than never. But seriously, why are y'all always late? When we get back on the Hoffman Show, David Aldridge talking about the Wizards coaching search, what's next for the old Zardos, and of course, a wild and wacky NBA playoffs. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Ton of NBA this hour, and it starts right now with, well, a Hall of Fame level of expertise. It is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
David Aldridge, senior writer for The Athletic, Kurt Gowdy Award winner, Hall of Famer. David, great to talk, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, Craig. How are you?
I am doing quite well. Excited to talk some hoops with you. We have some Wizards hoops to talk about, and we have whatever these NBA playoffs are. Wild, wacky, mysterious, fun, all of the above. Let's start off with the Wizards, though. We actually spent quite a bit of time on this yesterday and looking at where they should be looking for their head coaching search. Whether it's the Mike Budenholzer type, whether it's, can they find the next Mark Daigneault type or the next Nick Nurse, if you think of him coming up in Toronto, more so than the second time around in Philadelphia? Do they take the wild card and a swing at a guy like J.J. Redick? Is there like a coaching archetype that when you look at what the Wizards are right now that you think would be best at this stage of their build?
I don't think it's Bud, because Bud will have better options, frankly.
Sure.
Whether it's this cycle or after next year, he'll just have better teams to go to. He'll have his choice of top jobs, I think, going forward. So, look, from what they are and what they're trying to do, I just don't think it makes sense to hire anybody but a young development type guy that is going to be able to grow with the team. I mean, whether or not, how long they keep Kuzma or Jordan Poole, the players that are going to help the Wizards get to the next level and get back to being a contending team are all in high school right now. I mean, with the exception of Koulibaly. Like the rest of them, all of them are in high school right now. Maybe one or two of them are about to enter their freshman year of college or the college year equivalent, 18 to 19 if they're playing abroad. But, the roster that is going to be good is not here yet. So to me, I think you have to maximize the development and the improvement of the young guys on your roster. Again, Koulibaly's the first, but whether it's Kispert or Abdi or those other guys that could be a part of this thing going forward as well. To bring in a veteran coach that's going to say my way or the highway, this is how we do things, and not be willing to grow or experiment or try things doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Are there names then that are the hot names around the league right now? Obviously, Brian Keefe is going to be one of those names and kind of fits that mold as a guy who's been a lifelong assistant. And then kind of amongst that group, how highly do you think the Wizards rate on the open jobs of where obviously we saw Adam Peters come to Washington and we're like, hallelujah, the Commanders are back in some sense because they got the number one guy. Where do the Wizards rank with Winger and Dawkins in charge and running things the way they are?
Well, there's not that many jobs available right now. It's just the Lakers, which are, again, at a different place than the Wizards are going to have a different group of candidates for that job. And then you have Charlotte and you have Washington. I think a lot of people around the league think Charles Lee's getting the Charlotte job. He's with Boston this year. Was with Bud in Milwaukee for several years, and moved on to Boston this year. Boston wanted him very badly, and is thought of as a great up-and-coming young head coach, and is going to be, highly sought after. I think that would be the type of guy I would think I would. If I were the Wizards, I'd certainly say, hey, can we get in on this? Is there any way we can get you to kind of look at our situation going forward as well? Because Charlotte is, essentially in the same boat as the Wizards are in terms of where their franchise is. Now, they do have two pieces that the Wizards don't have in Ball and Miller that are really good young players that you can think you can build around. But they're not so much further ahead of where Washington is that I think it would be ridiculous for them to try to go after someone like that. So that, to me, is a guy that is the type of guy that I would be going after, that I would be looking at. You know, I'm sure some people think they should go after Darvin Ham now that he's available, since he was the finalist last time before they hired Wes Unseld Jr. And, you know, I would not dismiss that out of hand. I think, you know, whatever mistakes Darvin Ham made in with the Lakers this year, they don't disqualify him from ever being a head coach again. I mean, it's one of the things, Craig, that's interesting, is that we allow players to make mistakes all the time when they're young. We expect them to make mistakes, but we don't extend that same grace to young coaches. You know, we don't ever say, well, this guy's in his first year as a head coach. He's not going to be perfect. He may make some mistakes. He may do things incorrectly. And instead of saying, okay, well, let's grow with that, let's let him coach through those mistakes, we fired them, you know, and it just speaks to a kind of, and that's the job. I get it, hired to be fired, but I just think it's kind of short-sighted if you have a young guy that you want to grow as a coach, as your team grows, why you wouldn't allow them that same ability to make mistakes that you allow your young players.
Totally. And it's the kind of thing where if I'm a JJ Redick, for instance, I'm just going to use JJ because he's the biggest name that everyone knows. Like, I want to go to a place like Washington as opposed to Los Angeles, where they're like, we got to win right now. And if you're here, you probably have a 5-year window, and you're like, I will be allowed to make mistakes because the pressure is not so intense. And it's also the kind of thing that I wonder for the Lakers. We talked about this with Spiro Ditas earlier in the week. Milwaukee's kind of been in this situation with some of their decisions. The Lakers, how much are you limiting your own talent pool to pull from if you've got coaches thinking, like, I can't make any mistakes? Obviously, the upside you see, you got a championship-level roster, but is that a place I want to go if I'm going to be written off forever if I get fired after 2 years?
Well, I mean, Exhibit 1 is Adrian Griffin, right? He's 30-11. Got fired. You know, like, look, you can rationalize it any way you want for whatever reason you want. But if I'm a young coach, you know, trying to go to that pressure cooker, you know, the deal, whether it's you know, especially with the Lakers, with LeBron's situation, is that your standard is win a championship. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no other level. There's not, well, you know, we'll roll with you for 3 years and grow, let you grow. It's like you got to be ready to win a championship if you go there, and if you don't, you're going to get fired. And that's what we found out in Milwaukee and in LA this year. So yeah, I mean, it certainly limits the pool of coaches that are willing to do that, because a young coach isn't going to get paid, and a veteran coach is going to want a whole lot of money to come there and be in that pressure cooker right away. I mean, that's high expectations. You're going to want to get paid for that. And Monty Williams has raised the bar for every coach, right? You know, so his contract kind of changed the paradigm a little bit in terms of what people will be willing to pay for head coaches. So, it's definitely not there. That's a closed shop in terms of not many guys are going to be willing, even at big money, to go into that type of situation.
Not to get too sidetracked by the Lakers, as David Aldridge is our guest, but real quick, DA, like, is Pelinka on the hot seat out there? Because I think it's so easy to look at what's happened there, and there's obviously many things that have gone wrong, and wrong is also a relative term. Like, they were in the Western Conference Finals last year, and if you don't have LeBron James, that's a great season. If you're not the Lakers, that's a great season. But there's definitely been more than questionable roster management. Is Ham going to be the fall guy and the only one here, or are there more changes potentially being bantied about in Los Angeles?
I don't get any sense that Pelinka's in trouble. You know, I would say if Pelinka were in trouble, that would be an indictment of ownership out there, because, you know, Jeannie Buss and the Buss family okayed everything he did last year. And in full disclosure, I did too. I thought running it back made a lot of sense. So keeping Austin, you know, and not trading some of their other players, whether it's Rui or D'Angelo Russell or some of the other guys, I kind of thought made sense, because to your point, they were in the Western Conference Finals last year. Like, so why wouldn't you bring that group back for another run? Now they didn't have a ton of injuries this year. They had some, Gabe Vincent being out, I think, really hurt them more maybe than we all understand. But they didn't. Most of their rotation guys played a lot of games, so it just didn't. It didn't work. And Darvin has to take a lot of blame for that. I don't think he's blameless, certainly. I think he has to take a lot of blame because the rotations were all screwed up all year. But they wound up playing the exact same team they played last year. It was a pretty good team until 3 days ago. We all thought was the defending champ and was almost invulnerable, right?
Right.
So that's how sports goes. That's how the NBA goes. You are the undisputed baddest man in the world until Buster Douglas knocks you out, and then you're not. And that's how sports goes, And so it just is how it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But to answer your question, I think Pelinka's in good shape out there.
All right. David Aldridge with us here on the Hoffman Show. And I agree. Like, once you make it to where they did last year, it's just, how they got to that point and whatever. But again, I don't want to get too sidetracked by the Lakers discussion. Speaking of the formerly biggest, baddest bully on the block, we can circle back to them in a moment, but let's focus on the team that proverbially punched them in the face. I was very dismissive of the T-Wolves because the way, like the demeanor, the everything of Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert's playoff history just told me, like, yeah, we've seen this script before. I know Anthony Edwards is different and growing and is reaching a new level, but I don't know that he can overcome all of the other stuff. Boy, was I wrong on that one, David. Is that the biggest difference here, or has there been a shift beyond the greatness of Anthony Edwards that has propelled the Minnesota Timberwolves to where they are, which is, in the eyes of many, title favorites at this point?
Well, it starts with Ant. I think he's playing at a different level than even last year, and he was at a very good level. But there's other things going on, too. I mean, you have to remember last year, Minnesota played without Naz Reid, who was injured, and then the last game of the regular season, Jaden McDaniels broke his hand punching a wall in frustration. And those are two huge parts of their rotation that are now playing and are now available. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is playing at a high level this year. So their rotation is longer, both in terms of number of players and in terms of size, than it was last year, and that is creating incredible amounts of disruption. They are doing an incredible job of really not just defending Denver, but really kind of getting in their heads a little bit. I was telling somebody today, this is kind of like watching a football defense, like watching the Ravens defense in 2000, where they didn't just beat you, they kind of intimidated you a little bit, right? And so Denver played intimidated. They played scared yesterday. They got frustrated. They got Jamal Murray throwing the heat pack from the bench. Michael Malone, charging the floor, trying to get teed up. That's just not what a defending champion is supposed to look like. And it was a testament to the Wolves. The Wolves made them do that, so you have to kind of give them credit for that level of defensive intensity that they caused the defending NBA champion that had just destroyed the Lakers. They made them look timid at home. And that's unusual. But it was warranted because that's how hard and how effective Minnesota was defensively. And again, it comes back to they can run 6, 7, 8 guys out, and the only one of them that's under 6'5" is Mike Conley, the point guard. Everybody else is 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", and they're long and they're athletic and they just keep coming at you, and they're just playing at a really, really high level defensively. Look, they've been the number one team in defense all year in the league. They're the best defensive team in the league. It's not an accident. But for them to do it against a team as potent as Denver is really eye-opening.
Yeah, and they were, middle of the pack offensively, the number one offensive team in the playoffs so far. And I heard on Zach Lowe's pod, I was listening on the way in today, they are the only team that has a higher effective field goal percentage in the playoffs than they did in the regular season. So we're seeing this team just peak and blossom at the right time. A team that, like the team that they are beating up, was built by Tim Connolly, now the president for the Nuggets or for the Timberwolves, who obviously, as you know, DA, but just for the audience, used to run and be the general manager of the Nuggets, and a guy that was crushed when he made the Gobert trade. Because for the first 2 years, that looked like a colossal mistake. But what do you think Connolly knew in hindsight? And also, what has he done to make himself right, if you will, in hindsight, that none of us who criticize or just at least were looking with kind of a side eye at that deal were thinking about at the time?
Well, I think a lot of teams in the league are looking at size again. I mean, we talked a lot about positionless basketball and downsizing and playing small and all that, but I think you're seeing the pendulum swinging back now to, hey, we got to be bigger to compete. Like we have to, we can't just have 6'5" guys out there. Like we have to have length. You have to have long arms. You have to have guys that can contest defensively and give second effort and those things. And, Oklahoma City's doing it. Minnesota's doing it. Denver does it with its starting lineup. It doesn't have much coming off the bench in terms of size, but they got longer, in their starting five. And that's what the Wizards aspire to bring it back to Washington. I mean, they're just so far from being there, but that's why they took Coulibaly, because they said, look, this guy's got length. He's got real positional length and is 18 years old, so the hope is he gets longer and taller, right? He might have one more growth spurt left in him, the same way Giannis added a couple of inches after he was drafted. And so that's, teams are doing that. I think we talked about this earlier about, making mistakes and being allowed to grow through those mistakes. I think last year, Rudy was not good. He just wasn't very good. And part of it was new system, new teammates, new expectations after being in a very kind of familiar, comfortable setting in Utah for all of his career, right? And so you have to allow that maybe it takes a guy, even a veteran, maybe it takes him a year to get comfortable in a new situation with new teammates. And now he looks comfortable. And they have, also last year, you got to remember, not just Naz Reid being hurt, but Karl Anthony Towns missed most of last season with an injury, that he suffered here in Washington, actually, early in the season. So he's been healthy most of the year. I mean, health matters. It's the most important predictor of success in the playoffs to me is how healthy is your team, compared to the other team. And I'm not taking anything away from Minnesota at all because they've been the better team the first two games. But it's clear Jamal Murray is limited with his calf injury. He just can't go. He can't do the things that he normally would do out there on the floor. So he is just much less of a threat offensively than he normally would be when he's healthy. And that's just reality. It's not an excuse. It's reality. And that doesn't, again, if Minnesota winds up going all the way and winning the title, they earn the title. They're the best team. But you do have to factor in that they played a somewhat diminished Jamal Murray in the second round.
For sure. And, hey, Denver won it last year in part thanks to the aforementioned series against the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. LeBron was not 100% with his foot, and that is the nature of the league every single year. It's so interesting, DA, because we see the length and everything you're saying makes a total sense. And then there's Jalen Brunson at 6'2", suddenly scoring 40 points every night. And it's just absolutely amazing to watch that man work. And the fact that the Knicks plan, the oversimplified version is, hey, this guy's really good. He won a championship in college with these two other guys that are also in the league and pretty good. Let's get them together and see what they can do. But it really does feel on given nights that Villanova 3 is just able to do what they do in the NBA. And I think it speaks to kind of, we talk about the through line of everything we've talked about here being comfortability and growth and the ability to make mistakes and evolve over time. A guy like Gobert, I think actually one of your colleagues at The Athletic wrote a great piece about like some of the neurological training that Gobert has done. And like, absolutely, as a veteran, like he got better. But when you see the chemistry of those three guys in New York, is that really the key, or is that a nice storyline and there's other things happening there that maybe aren't as obvious?
I mean, look, certainly those three are playing at a very high level. I mean, Josh Hart is just relentless attacking the glass. He he just has it. This is what this is what Barkley looked like when he played, when he was young. There's just some guys that just go get the ball. This is what Rodman did. He just went and got the ball. Like there's no teaching or, there's no program. There's just some guys that are wired to, there's the ball, I'm going to go get it. And Josh Hart just can do that. You can put a body on him. I thought Indiana did a great job in the first half. He still wound up with 15 rebounds. He just gets every rebound when it matters. And it's amazing to watch him. DiVincenzo, Golden State had him. Sacramento had him. He's been on good teams before. And this just seems to be a better fit. For whatever reason, it seems like a much more natural fit. And Brunson is Brunson was great in Dallas. They screwed up royally by not re-signing him. It's just a colossal error on their part, and getting absolutely nothing for him. He just walks as a free agent. It's a total screw up. Now they made up for it by getting Kyrie, but he's incredibly hard to guard, Craig. I thought Philly did a great job against him in the first two games of that series. And then after that, when he figured out what they were doing, he just went into a different place. And he never gets sped up. He never gets rattled. They were very physical with him, and he just kind of figured it out. He knows how to draw fouls. He's very good at it. And he can score at all three levels. He's so good in the mid-range. He's so good coming downhill. He's got the Chris Paul move mastered where he gets you on his hip and then he just stops and you run into him. He's crafty. He's strong. He's just a really, really good player playing at an incredibly high level right now. And he's only 6'1". I'm not saying there's no room for small guys in the league, but you have to be elite, I think, and he's elite to play at his size in this league.
For sure. David Aldridge, the Hall of Famer, with us for one more minute here. And I'm going to lean on your years of covering the league and see if I can dip into some story time with DA here, because you mentioned Josh Hart. And Hart was asked, I don't know if you saw this, David, but about a week ago about his nutrition. And he apparently is basically fueled by Mike and Ike's, the candy. He said, everyone else's face on the box, no, that's all mine. Maybe. I drink a lot of caffeine before the game. I can say that. 300 to 400 milligrams, Mike and Ike's. And then I'm ready, let's go run around. The nutritionist, Erica, we have fights. What's your best, pregame nutrition wacky story you've heard of a player in your 25, 30 years of covering the NBA?
Oh, well, there's always been guys who had unusual training methods. Look, Rod Strickland is famous when he was here for eating hot dogs and hamburgers and all kinds of terrible stuff before games and still going out and getting 10 assists. Gary Payton's meals were different. Maybe more of the liquid variety, and he went out and did great. Iverson stayed out all night and came in and play, and would play great. There's just some guys that are wired a little differently and can handle that kind of atypical, let's say, training table methods that most guys would not be able to handle very well. Darrell Armstrong, I remember back in the day, he used to drink tons of coffee before the game, like tons of coffee, and so there's just guys that can do that and still go out and play. It's weird. It's not for everybody, obviously, but there's been many guys in this league that kind of do it a different way than would be recommended for a professional athlete, but they still get it done.
Yeah, no, I think it's hilarious that he's like, Erica and I get in fights. I bet. But, hey, it works. He's out there playing Tibbs minutes, and he's able to sustain it. So good for Josh Hart. David Aldridge, are you covering anything in particular? You just kind of taking it all in from home. What can we expect? Click on your tab on The Athletic.
I will be in Minnesota this weekend.
Nice.
I'll be in Minnesota this weekend for 3 and 4, and obviously writing off of that series. And, it's a great story. I'm happy for the people out there. And it should give, and I say this parochially, I mean, in the last 5 years, two of the worst teams in the league historically, Minnesota and Sacramento, have become two of the better teams in the league. So there's hope for the forlorn Wizards fan base. It is possible to turn the thing around.
Yeah.
If you get lucky in the draft. It's possible.
And that's the thing, DA. I think when the year Anthony Edwards came out, no one was like, oh, man, Minnesota, great year to have the number one pick. It doesn't matter how deep the draft is. You got to get yours right.
There was, look, every draft, including this one, which everybody says, oh, it's not very good. Look, in every draft, there are 4 or 5 guys that become stars. Every single one. You got to pick them. This is the job of Michael Winger and Dawkins going forward. Is they got to find that guy in this draft, and then they got to find him again in the next draft, and then they got to find him again in the 26th draft. That's their job. And if they do that, then the rebuild could be a lot shorter. But you can't sit back and go, "Wow, it was a bad draft. We couldn't." No, you got to pick. You got to find a guy that's special in this draft.
Yep, and we'll find out Sunday. Draft lottery. We'll see how high their selection is.
Yep.
David,
Absolutely.
always appreciate your time. So generous with it during a busy time of year. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Craig. Thank you very much, sir.
That is David Aldridge, everybody, the Hall of Famer, with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we could have kept DA for the whole hour, which would have been incredibly rude. So I had to pick and choose. But Ant, we will leave the should Jamal Murray get suspended discussion to ourselves. We'll dive into the Nuggets' just absolute poop fest last night, and whether they're going to be without their star guard for Game 3 next here on the Team 980. I was trying to think of what kind of joke I could make about this and the arrested nature of the Denver Nuggets right now.
Man.
Yikes, bro. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. And if you just missed David Aldridge with us, what are you doing? I mean, okay, maybe you had to, send that extra email getting out of work, whatever it is, but you definitely want to go check that out a little bit later on the Hoffman Show podcast feed, and I'll have it up coming up a little bit later, sometime after 6 o'clock. I will also post it up on YouTube and all our digital platforms as well. You can, however, rewind right now on the free Odyssey app and then catch up with us if you like. But amazing 25 minutes with the Hall of Famer David Aldridge for Not My Beat today. We did talk about a lot, obviously, with the Nuggets, with the Wolves, how well they've done. But we didn't actually get a chance to talk to what is perhaps the most pressing issue now out of this series going into Game 3, Anthony, which is Jamal Murray's status. We did talk about, David mentioned, like, this calf injury that he's got very, very clearly is hampering him. Also hampering him is the fact that he's getting pressured 94 feet nonstop. But he takes out his frustration on, admittedly, a couple of frustrating calls, some bad calls. Well, speaking of bad calls, boy, will we get there with the Knicks-Pacers game. But he takes out his frustration by first throwing a towel in Mark Davis's direction and then throwing a heating pad, which just as someone, like, I don't even know, as someone who's played sports, as someone who's never, like, as a human being watching that, I can't fathom doing that and putting my teammates and nevertheless my opponents at risk of slipping on that and busting an ankle, man. Like, it's so dangerous. It's so stupid. And I think combined with the towel throw first, the fact that you're throwing stuff in the direction of an official and you were dumb enough to throw something on the floor during the game that could have, by the way, near like a ton of feet in action, I think the NBA should suspend Jamal Murray. And I don't even think it's that difficult. Like, if this was a regular season game, I'd probably suspend him for 3. You can't do that. It's so impossibly stupid. And I just can't fathom what was going through Murray's head to make him do that. And I know that feels harsh. And do I want to see Jamal Murray on the floor? Of course. It's not what I want as a fan. But if I'm the league, like, we can't be doing that. And I just think it's a no-brainer suspension. Nevertheless, the fines he's going to accumulate for doing some of that dumb stuff. And, by the way, doing my least favorite thing, which is not my least favorite thing, one of my least favorite things, one of my pet peeves, which is, I'm having a bad day. I'm not going to answer reporters' questions. I'm going to stop being a professional. I'm going to go pout and not answer questions. That's for a guy in Jamal Murray who's a champion, who I think, for everything I know I've ever heard about Jamal, he's a phenomenal dude. Just to go into that, like, sour loser place just seems so unlike him that, it's the kind of thing that makes you wonder on a human level, like, you got something else going on, man? Like, are you all right? What? Like, I just can't fathom what got into Jamal Murray to make him do that stuff. But as the league, there's only so much I care. I'd suspend him. And it's really not that difficult of a decision, as much as I hate suspending a superstar for a must-win playoff game.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the player health and safety, him putting his teammates and his opponent, like, in danger, I think is also just a no-brainer. And also, I think you just got to set the precedent, because it sucks that it has to be Jamal Murray that's facing this punishment. But if you don't, come down hard on him, then it's going to be okay, for, future players to be able to go out there and just start throwing things at the ref and things of that nature. But I do think it sucks for the Nuggets, just because they probably will be without Jamal Murray. But had the refs been able to, rewind this back in real time and actually figure out that it was Jamal Murray that threw the heating pad and the towel, him getting ejected yesterday would have served them way better than it will,
100%.
Losing him for Game 3. So it sort of kind of does. Like, I wish it would have happened yesterday, just because that game was already out of hand. Frustration was boiling over. He was frustrated.
You throw him out yesterday, you don't need to suspend him.
Exactly.
No, that's a great point, Anthony. I hadn't really thought about that too heavily. Yeah.
It stinks, but the Nuggets are definitely in trouble. Like, that, going into a must-win game without Jamal Murray and with Jokic also struggling from the field, I don't know how they get the job done in Minnesota. I don't know how they do it.
I mean, that crowd's going to be nuts. It is the kind of thing where sometimes, and we've seen this a ton throughout NBA history, and I swear to God there was an example of this last year, and I'm just not remembering what the team it was. But we see these teams where it's like they're done. And Golden State's done this a bunch, actually, throughout their run, where they get the absolute poopsie beat out of them. They just get curb stomped, dump trucked, bamboozled, whatever. Pick your favorite term. Yeah, they get people's elbowed down through the canvas. And next thing you know, they win the next 3 games. And you're like, what happened to that team from game 2? And you're like, it was 1 game. And they let go of the rope, and then they go find the rope, and they put it all back in place. And they're like, you know what? We're champs. We've done this before. You can't knock us out that easy. And there is still a chance of that. And this is my own personal hesitancy here with the T-Wolves. I just don't trust them. I trust them way more than I ever have before. And it's not even that I don't trust them as a whole. I don't trust Karl Anthony Towns. And I have seen Rudy Gobert be played off the floor in series enough that I have concerns there. What I'll say about Rudy is this, and obviously he wasn't on the floor last night. Congratulations to him and his partner on the birth of their first child, a daughter, I believe. So, all the discourse about him and his, whether or not he should miss the game. He's a human being, gets to do what he wants. If he wants to be there for the birth of his child, that's one time only. That's his decision to make. If he wants to miss that for the game, that's, again, also his decision to make between him and his partner. But yeah, that's, again, I'm not even going down that road. That's all there is really to say about that. But for Gobert, he has improved as a player, and I think Chris Finch and that staff deserve a ton of credit for putting Rudy in positions to not be played off the floor, to surround him with the right pieces, to schematically use him in a smarter way than he was in Utah, where by the end of every series, it's like, is Donovan Mitchell going to save Rudy Gobert's ass? And that hasn't been the case here. He's also an older and wiser player. Rudy deserves a ton of credit for that and how he's gone about improving his game. Karl Anthony Towns is so hilariously unlikable and does some of the goofiest stuff I've ever seen on a basketball court. I do worry about him really messing up a game for them. But I think that, obviously Cat at his best is an exceptional player. They've gotten some really great Cat in this series. And I think the difference, Ant, of why ultimately I, obviously am going to pick Minnesota at this point in the series up 2-0, Denver would have to win 4 of 5 games, is even if they get a weird, stupid Cat game where he commits 4 fouls in the first quarter and is totally ineffective, with how Naz Reid is playing, and of course, with how Anthony Edwards is playing, I'm not sure that it matters. Cat's the piece that they're going to need to win a championship to be consistent for 3 out of 7 games, right? And then maybe you can win 1 in spite of him or without him, where he's more of a neutral. You're going to need him to play better. But at this stage, with a 2-0 lead and the Nuggets wounded like they seem to be, if you get Cat, it's a blowout. If you don't get Cat, you're in a dogfight. And by the way, I don't know there's a better player to have in a dogfight right now in the whole league than Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, Anthony Edwards is definitely up this play. And going back quickly to the example you were talking about, if you think back to the finals, the Bucks won, I think that was 2021. They were down 2-0 to the Suns, came back 1-4-0.
Yeah.
But again, I think without Jamal Murray, I don't think that is possible. But who knows, Jamal Murray's fate, they don't play again until Friday, so.
Yeah, maybe some time off. And, if they can somehow steal one, the Wolves' immaturity shows up all of a sudden. They let their guard down without Murray. Murray's suspended. That's an extra day for him to rest. And all of a sudden by Sunday, he looks like a totally different player. This still could happen. I think the Nuggets are mature enough and have been there enough to be able to overcome this. But I'm not going to pick for it to happen. I won't be stunned, but I would be surprised. At this point with how well Minnesota's playing. Minnesota's good. They're the best defensive team in the league, and they've kept that up. I don't know what more you want from them. I would like a correct call in the Knicks-Pacers series. Oh, man, what an ending that was. And why can't the Knicks play a semi-normal basketball game? We'll talk about the Eastern Conference series that went down last night. Next, before we get a little take command for you at the top of the hour here on the Team 980. Will the New York Knicks ever play a normal basketball game ever again? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And I'm going to peel the curtain back. You come inside the Hoffman household last night. So Monday nights we typically watch The Voice on NBC, and we, like during the playoffs, I've obviously kept an eye on the games. I'll pull up my iPad and pull up a game. And so last night we've got The Voice on, and the Pacers-Knicks game is on the iPad, and I'm kind of watching it a little more than I usually do because some of these games have been, it's first round of the playoffs is super hit or miss on how tight the games are. And by the end of the third quarter, Rachel and I were both exclusively watching the iPad. And so we're just like, this basketball game is too good. Forget this. We'll watch this tomorrow. Like we'll put this on the big TV. And then we watched just an absolutely bananas fourth quarter where, I think you have to give a huge credit to the Pacers and for keeping things as close as they did and playing as well as they did with Tyrese Halliburton not playing well. Halliburton after the game saying, like, I got to be better. I will be better in game 2. We'll see, man. Like it's been an up and down playoffs for him, but how do you contribute without scoring is one question, but at the end of the day, if you're Tyrese Halliburton, you need to start scoring, sir, and certainly he knows that. But I think this game, obviously the big talking point comes down to not the performance of Jalen Brunson and his 43 points, not the fact that Josh Hart went 24, 13, and 8 in 48 minutes. It's crazy. Dante DiVincenzo, 5 of 9 from 3, 25 points. OG Anunoby plays 42 minutes and just, really solid defensively. He and Brunson have the highest plus minus for the Knicks last night. And all of these different amazing basketball things, it unfortunately comes down to the refereeing, which happens way too often in this sport. And we see first this phantom kickball call, which it goes against Indiana. And then you see ultimately the game decided, if you will, or the biggest swinging point in the game because it happened so late with the Pacers trying to tie the game. You see, because it was at that point, was it a 1-point game, actually? Were they trying to take the lead there?
On the phantom.
The illegal screen call on Myers.
Yeah, they were down.
Not on Myers Leonard, on Miles Turner.
Yeah, they were down 1.
Yeah, so they're down 1. They're trying to take the lead. And Miles Turner is called for an illegal screen. I will say this. By the letter of the law, that is the correct call. He was not 100% stationary, and as the official, I'm trying to think of who it was. I think Zach Zarba, the official said, you have to be set long enough that the opposing player has time to, change directions and get around your screen and all that stuff. And Miles Turner didn't do that. But he didn't do that at a rate that is very standardly acceptable in the NBA. If that screen happens in the middle of the second quarter, there's no call, nothing, nobody thinks twice of it. And in fact, if that call doesn't happen last night, there's not a single Knicks fan on the planet that would even thought about screaming about an illegal screen. Because that is how normal that is. And I am often someone who is like, just call the game the way it's written, and that's fine. But you have to be consistent. And if you're going to accept that as in the NBA in general and within this game as an allowable screen, you can't suddenly call it differently with 12 seconds left. It's absurd. But the problem then becomes when you go to the monitor, you have to then letter of the law it. You can't be like, after further review, we should have not called that, even though it was technically by the letter of the law an illegal screen, because we don't call it like that in the normal course of play. And so thus, by NBA unwritten rules, the coach's challenge is accepted, and it'll be Indiana basketball side out. You can't do that. And it's part of the frustration, I think, at times with replay is, the way the rule is written right now, too, this happens late in games where a ball goes out off of someone, but what you see is on the replay, the ref missed an obvious foul, and they can't correct it. And so it sucks. And I think the thing is, and it sucks even more because, let's see, there's 12 seconds. I'm not going to try to do math. 43 seconds earlier, I did it. It's 55 seconds to go. 43 seconds of game time earlier. Dante DiVincenzo sets a blatant, didn't even try to hide it, moving screen. on a Pacers player, and there's no call because I think it was actually on Turner. You have a big or a guard screening a big and just kind of gets to run into him willy-nilly. You reverse it, DiVincenzo flops, and all of a sudden you have a game-changing call. It's just ridiculous. And I'm just so tired of seeing NBA games come down to these big late calls. And sometimes you got to make a call. Like, that's part of the game. The officials have to decide, like, how involved am I going to be here? But that just, it was an easy one to not be involved with. And I think that's the frustrating thing is, like, for once the refs did the thing that they get accused of all the time, which is they inserted themselves in a game in a way that was abnormal in a big moment, and nobody's there to see you. So don't do that.
That they didn't necessarily have to do.
No.
But I think DiVincenzo, him flopping, I think that's a huge gamble, like, at that point in the game because, again, like, you're not taught to just go out there and flop. You're taught to, be strong, fight through the screen. And for him to do that, like, say, like you just said, had they not called it, no Knicks player would, try to point it out. I think Jalen Brunson, if the Pacers score there, they end up and the Knicks end up losing. Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, they're going to DiVincenzo saying, yo, we can't afford for you to, take that kind of risk in this pivotal point of a game. So I think the flop itself was risky, but at the same token, like, I just hate the call, man. And it's crazy because the Knicks keep getting bailed out like this. Against the 76ers, they got bailed out a couple of times. And now in the first game of this series, they're getting bailed out. Joel Embiid, he's on Twitter tweeting LOL. Like, it's crazy. I mean, he's probably still salty, but at the same token,
sure.
I think he's valid in, being upset with the officials in Madison Square Garden.
100%. And, officials are human. You get caught up in the emotion of the game. And if you're it's not like a conscious, like, I'm gonna make calls for the Knicks. It's like you get swept up in the emotion, and it infiltrates the way that you are able to have clarity.
Yeah.
But I will give this credit to the Knicks. They consistently take advantage of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They hit the shots. They hit the free throws. Brunson is just incredible. The Villanova 3 scores 33 of the Knicks' 39 fourth quarter points. The Knicks still scored 39 fourth quarter points. If you're the Pacers, if I'm Rick Carlisle, am I like, yeah, hey, guys, I saw the call. That's frustrating. Guess what? If we don't give up 39 in the fourth quarter, that's not a problem. Tyrese, if you can score the ball, you can hit some shots, this isn't a problem for us.
Nope.
And that's the thing, is like you have to, as a coach, keep your team focused. And I think you have to ultimately be more prepared to take it out of the refs' hands. But credit to the Knicks. They've been in these close games. They've played, the Philly series was the wackiest series that we've seen in recent NBA playoff history in terms of unpredictability and improbability of the comebacks and lead changes and all these other things. And the Knicks somehow have come out on top consistently. And I think that speaks to the mental toughness. It speaks to the clutchness of Brunson and DiVincenzo and Hart specifically. And congrats to them. They're fun to watch. And, game 2 coming up in just a couple of days. We'll talk more about the games and the series kicking off tonight, coming up at 6:30. But next, how good are what shape are the Commanders' skill position groups in after the NFL draft? Logan and I discuss on Take Command, and you'll hear it next on the Team 980. The Hoffman Show. We're live on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, where you can also check out the Take Command podcast by yours truly and Logan Paulson, talking Commanders all year long. We kind of did a post-draft report card, if you will, for the Commanders, part one of which we'll let you hear in about 30 seconds here as I tell you more of what I mean. Although I don't have to set it up too much because this is the first part of the podcast, so we set it up in the show. But basically, like, what does the team look like now that we've seen who Adam Peters selects in the draft and even some of the UDFAs that maybe inform our views? So without further ado, Take Command for you. The full episode, of course, in the feed. But right now, here you go on this. What day is today, Ant? Is this today? Today's a Wednesday? Today's Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. On a Tuesday.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulson and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. Take Command podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulson. And Logan, today we are going to take a look at where this roster is post NFL draft. We have been talking a lot throughout the NFL draft process about what we think this draft could teach us and what some of these free agent signings, obviously before that, teach us about the remaining incumbent players and how Dan Quinn and his staff might see some of these guys, what roles they could ultimately inhabit in 2024. And so now that we have all those pieces in place, I think it'd be good to circle around and kind of look at each. We're going to go through the entire team by position group and be like, okay, what do we got here? And who do we see being impact players in 2024? Sound good to you?
It sounds great, man. Sounds great.
All right, let's do it then. And let's start with quarterback, because when do we not start with quarterback? Obviously, Jayden Daniels, for whatever it's worth, ESPN.com has him number one on the depth chart over Marcus Mariota. He's going to have to win the job. And it's really, in some ways, it's like last year where like he's going to have to just come in and prove that he's ready. And as long as he's ready, a la Sam Howell proved that he was ready, he'll be QB1 when they open the season. If they think that he needs a little bit more time, he's just not adapting to the offense like they want, doesn't have the command of it, the speed is too much for him, whatever, they'll start Marcus Mariota. But I just real quickly, quarterback and Jayden has been so much of the focus of the offseason. Now that he's actually here, what do you think he's got to prove in the spring to ensure that he actually is QB1? And how do you think that they'll like divvy up the reps when they go through the OTAs and minicamps?
Well, I think this thing is like multifactorial in a way that it hasn't been since I've been covering the team. And what I mean by that is obviously you have a new offensive coordinator, you have a new backup quarterback in Marcus Mariota, and you have a new, potential starter. Obviously, like you said, he's got to earn that position, all those different things. But I think the kind of the most compelling thing about the quarterback position is what does the offense look like with him at the helm? And that's something that I'm like kind of fretting at the bit to see here in terms of like what they end up doing. Does it have a lot of RPO? Does it have more zone read? Is it more of a vertical based passing attack? Like we've talked about this a lot, after watching a lot of Cliff stuff in 2021, there's a big element to that. So like just as a starting point, like what does that look like? And then if there's a big kind of West Coast emphasis, like I do think it'll take some time for him to adjust, because one of the things about watching the stuff at LSU is it was very vertical, it was very simplistic, and they just made it work because they got great execution from Jayden Daniels and the offensive skill players that they had there, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. So I'm just curious to see how he handles kind of there will be more on his plate, right? He's known to be a great studier. So that whole process will be really interesting. But I do think this is it's not like, it's to me, you said you made the comparison to last year, and I think it's a good comparison. I just think this is more so it's going to be Jayden than it was, like last year, like at least they kind of put on the illusion of saying, oh, it's going to be Jacoby or Sam. We all kind of knew they were favoring Sam a little bit, but I think we can just tell based on draft position and how they talk about this kid, it's going to favor him at some point. And I would expect him to be the starter kind of going into week one of the season. Now, that may not happen if he's really not ready, but I do think you're just looking like, can he handle the progressions? Can he handle the reads? Can he handle the protection responsibilities? Obviously, that's why you bring in Tyler Biotish to kind of handle some of that responsibility. But all indications from watching his film and talking with people, I think he'll be ready, based on the kid. But I do think the more compelling issue is like, what does the offense look like and how do they build it around him? And I think that's the kind of something I'm going to be keeping an eye on, obviously, with regards to the quarterback situation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Marcus Mariota can run that version of the offense. It might be best suited to run that version of the offense as well. So it's not like they got to create multiple offenses here. I think I would, if I were them, I would basically give Jaden the spring to get ready to be ready, if that makes sense. AKA, I would give him the 1 reps. I would give him, A, the first team reps, B, the most reps. And if by the end of the spring you've got real concerns, well, then you use training camp to get Mariota ready for the season because he's going to be the one starting the season. And maybe it's a more of a split reps than your traditional 1-2. You don't have to do it, exactly one kind of way. But at the end of the day, if Jaden, for whatever reason, is not ready, and I tend to agree with you, like they've already got our stuff, which they were going to get anyway, but especially once they knew it was him, like they've to study in the way that has been incredibly successful for him. So this is not to say that I don't think he's going to be ready, because I do agree with you. I think by week 1, like, he's your guy. But just in case, like, training camp then has to become about getting the team ready to play. It's not just a pure Jayden Daniels experiment. And so by giving him all these reps in the spring, you give him the opportunity. And Marcus has been around the league long enough to be able to learn and be able to do it without some of the reps. The reason you bring a guy like that in. And so I think that's kind of the lay of the land of the quarterback position. Obviously, the back end is also interesting. You bring in Jeff Driscoll. You also bring in Sam Hartman. And then Jake Fromm's in-house. One of those 3 is going to survive. I would imagine Fromm or I guess with the new practice squad rules, Driscoll hadn't played that much. He can probably, like, all 3 of them might be able to wind up being on. In terms of eligibility, I would imagine they keep 1 or 2 of them. Hartman getting the significant signing bonus money, unless he's just way out of his depth. I'd imagine he's one of them. So going to be interesting to see what they do. I would imagine Driscoll and Hartman are the 2 that stick around. But ultimately, Fromm, was impressed a lot of people last year in the way he handled his business. So that's kind of the quarterback position. Running back, you got Austin Eckler coming in as the big flashy name. Brian Robinson, the lesser known incumbent, but I think at this point, Robinson might be the better player. But those 2 are definitely going to split. Chris Rodriguez has shown quite a bit. And then they also brought in Jerry McNichols, who you played with actually in San Francisco, to kind of round out that room. I don't know how much there is to talk about here. I think you're going to have kind of your traditional 1-2-3 running back split here, with Robinson being the workhorse, Eckler having a lot of responsibility, and then Rodriguez being able to spell either of them. But especially kind of those power, you might give him a series, a half, and just be like, hey, go run as hard as you can. But we'll see. Anything more to really add to this running back position?
That's the thing we're going to be talking about with every position, much like the quarterback spot. Obviously, the quarterback spot seems to be painted a little bit more clearly. There's offensive implications and all that kind of stuff. I do think there's going to be a usage, just kind of like what they want from the back position. I think there's an assumption that, hey, it's going to be B-Rob and, Austin Eckler splitting reps. But McNichols here because you think that brings like some third down pass catching ability. I think when you look at the UDFAs they brought in, they're all kind of third down type body types. And, when you look at, what they did at LSU, when you look at kind of Cliff's background in terms of quarterback development, like, you need to be able to pass protect at the running back position, and you need to bring good value in the pass game in terms of upside. So I think, we're kind of operating under the assumption it's going to be a very traditional, kind of offensive philosophy. But I do think like that third down role that Austin Eckler is probably going to take over is going to be huge in this offense. And especially with a young quarterback, it's going to be exceptionally critical. So I could see a world where, hypothetically, B-Rob, has not been super efficient as a pass protector, and his usage pattern changes pretty dramatically because maybe they're prioritizing. And again, that's the fun part about this offseason with the new offensive coordinator. Maybe they're prioritizing, and I have no insight on this. I'm just saying, maybe you're prioritizing like that third down pass protecting role. And, Chris Rodriguez is a little bit better pass protector than B-Rob. So maybe that kind of shifts the power dynamic. And I think B-Rob's an excellent player and needs to be on the field. But that's one thing is going to be so exciting about this offseason is what does this offense look like? What are they prioritizing? What's the archetype in Cliff Kingsbury's mind for each position? Because when you look at Arizona, they have Connor, who's this big kind of very similar to B-Rob kind of back, but then you also have these like little scat backs that are great in pass protection and great on third down. So like there's going to be this very interesting kind of allocation of roles here, and I really can't wait to see it shake out. But I think more so than any other year, like that depth chart as it's laid out is so in flux. Like I've been a part of multiple staffs that have come in, and that you might as well just throw that depth chart out the window because they're going to pick who they like. And Dan has made that very clear. They want the best players to play. They want the best players to play for their system to play. And so I just want to kind of put that expectation out there. Like, I think B-Rob's excellent. I think, Rodriguez is excellent. I think Austin Eckler's excellent. But you never know in terms of rep allocation who's going to kind of embody the vision for the offense the best at the position.
Totally. And, I'm glad you brought up the James Conner thing because we can talk about all these other things that backs have to do, but the number one responsibility is like, can you run the football effectively? Especially if they're going to lean heavy into that running game. And it seems like that could definitely be a plan. You hear, like, I think Keim had some of that in the story he wrote over the weekend on ESPN.com about kind of their plan for Jaden and, how they plan on bringing him. And it's like, okay, well then Brian Robinson is probably the runner of that group, and especially in the kind of one cut style that they had in that final year in Arizona, where B-Rob has been compared to James Conner as a runner. So I think that's definitely going to be really interesting to watch because also you have Anthony Lynn here as the run game coordinator, and he spent last year with Kyle in San Francisco. So do they run that similar run scheme that Cliff ran at the end of his time in Arizona, or are they going to go to more of a zone type of scheme, marry the play action to it a little bit more, and then take some of the elements of Cliff's offense, but is Cliff kind of going to create this amalgamation of offenses and what backs ultimately fit that? Like, it is the fascinating question, but they've got options, which I think is fun. Receiver is one where I think we learned something in the draft about kind of what they have in house and what they think of it, because they could have gone big X receiver, kind of slid everybody over a spot, moved Terry to the Z, put Jahan in the slot, and then, filled out the rest of the roster from there. Instead, they draft a slot receiver in Luke McCaffrey. It seems like Terry's going to stay outside at X, and obviously Terry's been very successful there. Jahan, I think they see as an outside guy, although I'm sure there'll be some versatility within the offense. But I think there's also some other names that they've brought in / were in-house that are worth mentioning. Obviously, the guy they bring in is Olamide Zaccheaus, who has had some really nice years as kind of a down the depth chart receiver with Atlanta, amongst others. So, like, he's a real NFL player. He's not like a guy that I'm like, yes, he's my third receiver, but as a 4 or a 5, cool. Obviously, Diami's still here. In a vertical passing game, he's theoretically a threat. But he's actually a guy that I think has been more successful in the NFL as like a special teamer and a run block. The threat of vertical speed, which is a valuable piece. Like, hey, if we're going to run the football, Diami can play, and if we go out play action and try to hit a shot, like, he's a threat. Jamison Crowder they brought back, who had some nice time in the slot last year as kind of the smaller body type slot versus Luke McCaffrey. And then one other guy that I want to mention real quick, Logan, is Kaz Allen, who they kept from last year. Bryson Tremaine's still around too, but Kaz is a guy that they immediately put on a futures contract after the season and committed to being on the 90-man roster for the offseason. And so when we think both about special teams and punt returner and the new kick return rules, that's kind of why he was brought in as a UDFA last year. But if he's developed last year on the practice squad and ultimately is ready to play some offensive snaps this year, that's kind of that him and Crowder seem to be battling it out for one spot, that smaller receiver body type / punt returner to pair with McCaffrey as the bigger slot that they take in the draft.
Yeah, and I think this group might be the most compelling, in terms, obviously the top 3. And a receiver every year is really fun to kind of watch, I think, and kind of be, keep track of because there is so much flexibility. But I think, like you hit the nail on the head, I think it's going to be Terry. I think Luke and probably Zaccheaus are competing for that kind of big slot role. And I do think, again, this comes down to offensive vision and what you're thinking here in terms of which one of those guys probably snaps. But I think everybody else, to me, is up for kind of like putting in their resume a little bit here. Dax Milne, De'Ami Brown, Mitchell Tinsley, Bryson Tremaine, all these guys are going to have to carve a role. So I look at like kind of who are the best special teams players of this group. You mentioned Kaz Allen. I don't know if that return ability is enough to keep him around, especially because I think Luke McCaffrey has some ability. I think Zacchaeus has some return ability, and obviously Jamison Crowder has return ability, so I'm not sure that's enough to keep him on the roster. So again, like this group every year, like that, the fireworks are going to start when they start at training camp or when they start during OTA mini camp, training camp, preseason, because people are that this is a group that is definitely outside of those top 4 guys are definitely fighting for spots. And like Bryson Tremaine's a guy that I liked last year watching quite a bit, and he's got the size that everyone's looking for. Maybe he could be kind of a big slot piece, but then you kind of juxtapose that with the tight ends and you say, well, you got Cole Turner, you got Armani Rogers, you got Zach Ertz, you've got these guys that can kind of line up as big slots and kind of create mismatches that way. Maybe they look as an offensive vision, they say, man, we want to shift more to that kind of body type in that position. And then a guy like Bryson Tremaine is out or, whatever it may be. So I do think that this group, even after the draft, like it's solidified to a certain extent. But again, because we're not really sure exactly what they're looking for at the position, like to me, it comes down to special teams value add. And then when you look at it from that standpoint, the kid from Georgia that they brought in, Marcus Rosemy-Jack-Saint, is a guy that played great special teams at Georgia, had a nice Senior Bowl. There are some injury concerns from him from a draft standpoint, but maybe he makes some waves there as like a gunner or a vice guy, especially with the new special teams rules and kind of the emphasis on the kickoff. So to me, this group, the top 3 are the top 4, we'll throw another person in there, but everybody else, it's like, what is your special teams value and what is your role in the new offense in a way that is very different than any other position on the roster?
Do you think with the new kickoff rule and special teams being so important this year that changes how coaches approach training camp in terms of number of special teams periods, how they can, because there's such an evaluation on that, or is that still going to come down to drilling your special team stuff and then ultimately, in preseason games, seeing who can make plays and who executes the way that you want to?
I think that's exactly right. One thing I've noticed is that even though special teams has become less emphasized in the NFL, in practice it's still treated the same way. Like when I was playing in the NFL, there was this number of special teams period. When I go watch the Commanders practice, it's still the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So always been a point of emphasis. But I do think in terms of roster selection, it becomes more important. It becomes like it was when I first got in the league in 2010. Like those 3-4 top receivers are all going to play receiver. Everybody after that, you have to add value as a teams player. Like you have to. And I think that's kind of what you're going to get here. And so the type of guys you're going to see stay on the roster are going to be different. Like just as an example, like Dax, for example, is a guy that was a really good receiver that they were trying to find a role for on teams. I think now that's going to kind of flip on its head a little bit. You're going to find guys who are really good teams player that they're trying to find roles for offensively. So I think that's going to be the difference in terms of how they kind of treat that relationship.
Last thing on the receivers, the kind of difference between the big slots and the shifty slots, the traditional slots, if you will, the Crowders and the Kaz Allens, those guys versus like a Luke McCaffrey. Like, what's the value of both? And also what are we looking for during minicamp, training camp, et cetera, as we try to determine what Cliff is looking for out of his 4th, 5th, 6th receiver?
Well, I think the selection of McCaffrey kind of points you in a direction. I think even the selection of the bringing in a guy like Zacchaeus points you in a direction. And like body type wise, they're a little bit different, but they play in a very similar way. So I got to play with Zacchaeus when he was a rookie in Atlanta. And Zacchaeus is a physical guy. He's not a big guy, but he's physical. He's not
like
afraid.
5'8", 195.
Yeah, he's well put together. He'll block. He'll make tough contested catches over the middle. He's willing to like do some stuff in the run game that most receivers aren't able to do, and able to catch the football. And I think when you look at Luke McCaffrey, it's almost that exact same thing. And so what I'm looking at here, just the landscape, is I think they're going to kind of potentially shift away from that super small, shifty guy in the slot. And because you have Jahan on the roster, like if I want a super small, shifty guy in the slot, I can put Jahan out there and let him make a play for me. I can formation it so he's that guy. But in terms of attitude, I just look at, like, again, a perfect example is Kua for the LA Rams, or Michael Jennings in San Francisco, the slot receiver there who converted quarterback from Tennessee. They are guys that are awesome because they make it so hard for defenses to key in on personnel. And so what I mean by that is when you have a big slot like Luke McCaffrey, hypothetically, I think this is the role they see for him, is I can get to a lot of my 12 personnel runs because I've got a receiver that's physical enough to do the stuff that like a move tight end will do. Now, he's not going to do it as well as that move tight end, but from a personnel matchup standpoint, that's what I get. And I think that's what you're looking at. Like what I come out of the draft thinking is like, that is a big priority for this team. So in terms of selecting that third receiver, that fourth receiver, you definitely need guys who can do that, which is another reason why like the Bryson Tremaine thing kind of comes up to me, because like when you look at his play style, I mean, he spits nails, man. Like he's very physical as a gunner. He's going to get after you in the run game. Like I think that, and then that's how a guy like that would carve a role. Basically, I'm your second or third big slot guy because I'm willing to put my face on people and make these tough plays that other people aren't able to make. But then again, like it goes back to the tight end relationship too. Maybe you see some of those bigger body guys like Armani or Cole in that same way. So that's, I think, what you're getting out of that position, which I think is the way the position should be going. And I think that's the way you should be selecting the position. But I also think because of the flexibility of those first two guys, Jahan specifically, I can be more flexible with my roster. I don't have to keep, Kaz Allen as an example, because I have a guy who can get that stuff done for me in the slot. And I think to defend Luke here, I think Luke also can develop in that role as a route runner as well. So I think that's what the direction I think they're going to go with that slot position, just based on the decisions they made at the receiver spot. And then also when you look at the tight end position with the signing of Ben Sinnott, like they're looking for flexibility and things that make it hard for defenses to match personnel. So that's, in terms of anticipating what to expect going into OTAs, going into minicamp, and what the reporting is going to be out of it, that's what I would expect to see from that group.
All right, that is from Take Command, the full episode, including our breakdown of the trenches and very, very interesting conversation about the back end of the defense is available now in your podcast feed. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, we spend our final half hour previewing tonight's action in the NBA playoffs, wrapping up a couple of loose ends. An NFL free agent just signed who's a little bit interesting, I think, to talk about as well. We'll tell you who before the end of the show. That all still to come here on the Team 980. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. All right, Anthony, are you ready for our Champions League breakdown?
You said Champions League breakdown?
Yeah.
Of course.
All right, who played today?
You said what?
Who played today?
Hold on. I think we've lost you, Craig. Hold on. I'm not sure. Hold on. Like, let me make sure we got you.
You don't have any hot Mbappe takes?
You said what?
Any hot takes on Kylian Mbappe?
Because they lost to Borussia Dortmund?
Oh!
Yeah.
Well
yeah.
done, sir. Was that because it was still on the TV, or? And they've now shifted to hockey.
Oh, no. I didn't even know.
Or did you look it up on your computer? If I came over and looked at your computer right now, would it say Champions League?
Hey, look, you tell me, Craig. I don't know. Oh, he's actually coming on. Hey, why are you trying to look on my screen, sir? Craig trying to look at my screen, guys. This
definitely tip that away from where I could see.
Maybe. I might have done that.
Hey, honestly, you pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah.
That was a smooth little Google.
Hey, look, I needed to, delay the process by saying, hey, I think we're off air, Craig. Like, I don't know what the
Mbappe's PSG career going to come to a close with no major trophies, as he's probably going to leave after the season. And it's a lot of money they spent, the Qataris, for absolutely nothing. Yeah. But Borussia Dortmund on to the Champions League final. They beat PSG today 1-0. It's 2-0 on aggregate. Off they go.
Matt Hummels was still with Dortmund?
You're selling this amazingly well.
No, I mean, I'm surprised because I used to play FIFA.
I was going to say that, or you played FIFA with him like 4 years ago, and you're like, damn, he's still there?
Yeah. I'm like, good gracious, all right.
Should have known it was the FIFA route.
Yes.
Anyway, tonight in the NBA, what we're actually going to spend the next 8 minutes talking about here. Cleveland, Boston, Dallas, OKC. The simplest version of this question, Anthony, is, does Cleveland have a chance versus Boston?
No. Hold on. Before I say that, without Jared Allen, no. I think with Jared Allen, and if the Celtics didn't have Porzingis, I think they would have a chance. But without Jared Allen, no.
Yeah, that feels right. By the way, Porzingis is still listed as out.
Yep,
Jared Allen listed as a game-time decision.
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland's still without Ty Jerome, Craig Porter, and Dean Wade. So they have been missing some of that shooting and some of their depth in their backcourt. Wade's a forward. He's got some size and some shooting, which would be incredibly helpful against Boston. But without Porzingis, I think the Celtics become far more beatable. I just don't know that the Cavs are the team to do it. I just think Boston's a team that has so many bodies that they can throw at Donovan Mitchell that it's going to be really hard for Cleveland to score. Because I don't know who their secondary guy is. And night to night, I don't think they know. They'd like it to be Darius Garland. They like it for him to be more consistent. He really struggled against Orlando. But again, the size and I'm curious to see how Boston attacks Mitchell. But whoever's not on Donovan Mitchell is still a great defender. Like, that's kind of the thing. And whether they go Derek White, whether it's Drew Holiday, whether it's Jaylen Brown, like, they've got so many different dudes that are excellent perimeter defenders that they've got one for Mitchell, one for Garland. What do they do with Evan Mobley without Porzingis as an option? You could stick Tatum on him potentially and just kind of try to keep him off the boards. Brown is an option there, but they just don't have a secondary reliable decision maker and ball handler and shot taker and shot creator. And Boston has endless guys. Boston's got Tatum, obviously, Brown, obviously, Holiday, scored 50 in the playoffs a couple years ago with Milwaukee. Derek
White.
Derek White, thank you. I was like, the bald guy. Derek White is a shot. He's like a different kind of shot creator. He just always makes the right play. Horford, like, they've just got a bunch of guys who are comfortable making decisions, and that ultimately is what you need in the playoffs, is a bunch of guys who can make good decisions. And, oh, by the way, Boston's also pretty good defensively. It just feels like not a fair fight.
Yeah, definitely not a fair fight. And I think if the Magic were able to, make the series against Cleveland very interesting, limit Cleveland offensively. I can only imagine what the Celtics are going to do, because I think the Magic, the Timberwolves, those are some of the three best, defensive teams in the league. But Boston also has offensive output. They have Jason Tatum, they have Derek White, they have Drew Holiday, they have all this shooting that the Magic lacked, and all those games were close with the Magic because they couldn't hit the side of a barn. So I think it's not a fair fight, just because as good as the Celtics are defensively, offensively, they're just as talented, and I think they're going to, run away with these games, especially if Jared Allen isn't able to play.
I think the biggest thing is obviously the size that Cleveland has is a factor once Allen is back.
Yeah.
And from a rebounding standpoint, in their final game against the Heat, their leading rebounder was Tatum with 12, and no one else had more than 6. Now, a bunch of guys didn't play a ton of minutes because it was a pretty significant blowout by the end of the third quarter. But like the rebounding without Porzingis, without that size, like Brown and Tatum and Horford and to an extent White and Holiday, even, like, those guys need to crash the glass, because even if you hold the shooting percentages down, if Mobley's able to grab 8 offensive rebounds and dunk 6 of them, like, that becomes a problem. Allen obviously is an even bigger problem in that area. So I think that's like kind of the one under the radar thing to watch, is second chance points for Cleveland. But we'll see if Boston can keep that clean, and they should cruise in this series. I think it's like a 5, maybe 6 gamer.
If that, I think 4 or 5, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say 5 is probably where it goes. Boston does sometimes lose a little bit of focus. So
you're right. You are right about that.
Dallas, Oklahoma City is the other series that gets going tonight. I'm excited for the Thunder to get the spotlight. I hate that this series starts late at night. Like, there's only so much that people are going to watch because it's West Coasty, which is silly because it's also Central Time. Both these teams, they're only an hour behind us, but because they're the Western Conference, they're going to get stuck in the later window.
Yeah.
And I just wish that the Thunder, people were able to see more of what they can do. But this series is going to be fast. I actually do wonder if if Dallas tries to slow this series down, knowing that they have the half-court offensive creators in Luka and Kyrie to generate kind of isolation, half-court offense, and you take away in that some of the length. We were talking about this with David Aldridge earlier. If you missed DA today, by the way, tremendous chat with him at 5 o'clock, worth checking out on the podcast, or once we're done here in 20 minutes, just rewind to 5 o'clock in the Odyssey app, and you can check it out as if it were still live. But we talked with David about the length of Minnesota, and he mentioned Oklahoma City as a team that's built this way too. They've just got so much positional size. And so if you can try to take away some of their team defense and some of that arms everywhere approach that they have, and just isolate Kyrie or isolate Luka on a wing and let them go one-on-one, like, I don't know that that's not a good plan for stretches of this series for Dallas. And Jason Kidd, who kind of comes from a different era, obviously, as a player, and has seen that work and certainly executed some of that himself, posting up smaller guards in his day. Like, he's got that club in his bag. And so I'm definitely curious to see, like, do they run? Because they can get out on the break, and, Lively and Gaff, our old friend Daniel Gafford, like, they can get out and run and catch hoops on the break, and they can play the pick and roll game, and they've got shooters to play the spread pick and roll game. But I don't know that I want to get in a track meet with Oklahoma City. And so I kind of wonder the approach stylistically, if you're Dallas here, how much control do you try to let Luka Doncic exert on the series? And obviously Kyrie can play into many of the same ways that Luka does it.
Craig, to be honest, I have no dog in the fight when it comes to these two teams. I'm just excited for fast-paced offense, up and down. And like we always, talk about how we want to see a little bit more defense. In this series where there's just so much offense, I want to see a lot of highlight plays. I want to see Shea, rocking the baby, treating these guys like chair work. I want to see Kyrie doing in and out, finishing at the rim. I want to see Luka, put on. I'm here for the highlights, and I think that's what both of these teams are going to be able to go out there and display tonight. Just how to play basketball, like move the ball, utilize the pick and roll, get up and down transition. I think that's what's going to be on full display in this. I really don't know, like, who.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma City is like, there's a reason they're the 1 seed, and I think they'll find a way. But I think that Dallas will grab a couple, and the strain for Luka and Kyrie is going to be so high in this series. It's the way they're built.
Yeah.
Like, they are not a team that plays like beautiful team basketball. They're a team whose beauty comes from individual brilliance. And Oklahoma City's different. They do run a lot of stuff where Shea gets downhill and is able to dish off, and you got guys cutting and slashing, and it's much more of a 5-man game. But when your 2 guys are as good as Luka and Kyrie, why would you make it more complicated? And so it's going to be interesting. By the way, Jason Kidd got a contract extension yesterday, so
yes, he did.
The Mavs certainly are happy with what they're doing. The question is, can they find a way to unlock the ultimate potential of Luka Doncic, surround him with the right players, and knock off the number 1 seed in the Western Conference? That is a look ahead to tonight. NBA awards season is here. Just got the Defensive Player of the Year announcement. We'll tell you that. Who won it next on the Team 980? All right, lots of just late breaking things to catch you up on here as we end the show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We even have some, Anthony, unfolding right in front of our eyes. The NHL Draft Lottery is happening right now. Of course, the Capitals made the playoffs, albeit barely, but they did indeed make the playoffs, so they're not in this. But worth just saying, this is happening right now. When we see who gets the number one pick, we'll tell you. They're about midway through it. The NFL receiver that signed that I thought was interesting is Tyler Boyd, the former Bengals receiver, who was their second leading receiver last season. He signed with his former offensive coordinator, Brian Callahan, of the Tennessee Titans, $4.5 million a year. He is a guy that I had half an eye on, I think, for the Commanders. Great slot receiver, excellent third option, used to playing with other really great players. Obviously in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But I think when you're Washington, you probably just look at, hey, we just drafted Luke McCaffrey. They could have afforded Tyler Boyd. They've got the money, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's worth them taking the reps and the game time away from a guy they're investing in through the draft in McCaffrey. So that's kind of the Washington side of it. But I love this for Tennessee as they continue to build it's a hell of a receiving core now. They still have Hopkins. Who else? Who am I blanking on? They have Traylon Burks, Calvin Ridley, who they spent big money on, and now they have Tyler Boyd. And I think if you are them, your mission in year one as a staff is to find out if Will Levis is any good. And if Will Levis can't be good with them dudes, Will Levis isn't good. And then next year you're probably going to be bad. And next year, you go into the quarterback bucket in the draft, and you see what you can find.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised we didn't go after Tyler Boyd or like one of these other, veteran receivers.
Yeah.
Just because we're not in like a win now mode. I think if we were, closer to contending, even if we did get, Luke McCaffrey in the third, I think a Tyler Boyd on a 1 year, would have been intriguing. Just because, again, he adds some depth to what we already have here. But we're not in that situation. We're still rebuilding, or what is the word, recalibrating. I think, given the reps that Luke might get this year, he can blossom and develop into something good.
Yeah, you hope that their long-term plan, the trajectory works out in terms of the timelines and everything. Totally agree on Boyd in terms of DC. And again, I think you could make the argument of what Tennessee is doing, but I think, how good is Jayden Daniels and how good can we make his rookie year, really? But it's different because it's not about – Jayden's more of a long-term project, he's the guy.
Yeah.
In Tennessee, they're trying to find out, is Will Levis the guy? Mm-hmm. And one of the things about Boyd for them is he knows the offense. He knows what Brian Callahan's going to install. He's going to make life easier for everyone on that offense because he knows the language and can say, hey, this is what we're trying to get out of this play. So having some of your guys as a new head coach, as a new OC, as a new DC even, is super valuable, and Tyler Boyd fills that role for the Tennessee Titans. So he goes there, really good receiver who is now in Tennessee for the season, 1 year deal, $4.5 million. Rudy Gobert is your NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Not a surprise, Anthony. I think obviously it would have been very cool to see Victor Wembanyama get it, but at the end of the day, when you anchor the best defense in the league as the best defensive player, you get that award. And Gobert, now a 4-time winner, which ties, I think, a record held by Dwight Howard, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head. I think this kind of, this sounds nuts, but is Rudy Gobert a Hall of Famer? Can you be the best defensive player of your generation and not be in the Hall of Fame?
Tyson Chandler, he has 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards.
I guess you can be. Because Rudy Gobert as a Hall of Famer sounds insane. Now, if Minnesota wins a title this year and is competitive and he's a part of it for the next couple, that could change. But yeah, Gobert ties the record with Dikembe Mutombo and Ben Wallace as the only 4-time winners. I guess Dwight only won it 3 times. But yeah, Gobert's been in the league for less than 10 years and he's got 4.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like he remotely belongs as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But maybe he should.
I think a lot. I don't know, man. Oh, that's a good question, Craig. It's a
If
good
he
question.
wins, if he wins another one in 2 years, like 5-time Defensive Player of the Year, and you're not, I don't know. I didn't expect to end the show on a Rudy Gobert Hall of Fame. I need to think about that more because I don't think, to be clear, I don't think Rudy Gobert belongs as a Hall of Famer. I also don't know how you have the most prolifically awarded defensive player of a generation, potentially not. Okay, it's time for Real Things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Set into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
So a couple of weeks ago, the Kelsey brothers did a live show at University of Cincinnati. They just are releasing it now as they've gotten through all of the editing process, which means we get things like this. Joe Burrow was a guest, and he would like to be able to taunt people. No, really.
You're also pro-taunting.
I am pro-taunting, yeah.
So am I. Why are you pro-taunting?
We're all grown adults that work really hard. Sometimes we like to show it. I'm not going to get my feelings hurt if somebody sacks me and taunts me like, you made a play, I didn't. Like, good for you. You're allowed to taunt.
Have you ever gotten a taunting flag?
I've never got a taunting flag, no.
How many you got?
You can get a little feisty out there.
Just a wee bit.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my favorite taunting penalties that I got. Yes, I do have favorites. My first time playing it actually on the field against the Eagles in Kansas City.
KC. The year we won the Super Bowl. We did lose that game.
Yes, that was the last game you guys lost that year. Sure enough, it's a low-scoring game. We could have moved the ball too well on them. Smitty handed that thing off to Kareem Hunt, and it was me and Brandon Graham talking the entire game.
BG talks major.
He got a little windy. You know, they come in like hockey subs on the defensive line.
Yeah, it's some bullshit.
And sure enough, he went off for a play. I hemmed up the D lineman that came in for him on one back power, which if you guys don't believe I can block, I blocked on that
I was going to
play.
say, you were blocking?
I was, and I did my job. I felt so good that I thought I'd run over to the sideline and tell Brandon Graham to bring his ass back out here.
What happened?
Well, I got a flag for going to the sideline and talking to the sideline. You can't do that, kids. And then Brandon Graham continued to throw me around for the rest of the game.
Amazing. Perfect. No notes. See you tomorrow.